Hey everyone, before we start the show, I just want to get some plugs out of the way. If you enjoy this podcast and you're into wrestling, check out the Nerds and Marks podcast or Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling. If you're not getting your fill on movie and entertainment discussion, then check out the Entertainment Buffet podcast. If you want to dive into the world of video games, I highly recommend the Darkcast by my friends over at darkstation.com. Listen to them cover important topics and interview men and women from all over the industry. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of the Shelved Film Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. Now on today's episode, we're talking about a script that right after I saw this movie, I was dying to get my hands on. I never thought I would get it. Often considered it my white whale, if you will. But managed to stumble across it on a website that I actually frequent, or used to frequent pretty often. Hadn't been to in a while, and never expected to find it. So I am really excited to get into this one, really excited to talk about it. I've never discovered and read through a script so fast, just because it was one I was super excited for. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the original script for Alien Covenant called Paradise Lost. Now, basically, this was more of a... I feel like it served as a better sequel to Prometheus than what Alien Covenant ended up being. One thing you'll find about this script is that a lot of what happens in the movie is similar, or in the script is similar to what happens in the movie. But before we get into all the script talk, we just need to get some stuff out of the way. We're going to get our plugs out of the way, social media and stuff like that. If you want to follow us, be sure to check us out on Shelved Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show at shelvedfilmpodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions, script stuff you want to send, or just comments about some episodes. I've actually gotten some comments on the YouTube channel recently, which was just kind of some back and forth talking about one of the scripts. I think it was the Justice League one. So whoever that user was on YouTube, thanks for listening. Be sure to leave us a review on iTunes. Go there and leave us a 5-star review. You can do it right on your phone now, especially if you use the podcast app. They've actually made it even easier because you can do it right inside the show that you're clicking play on. So go ahead and leave that 5-star review. That really helps out the show. It's one of the best things you could do to help out the show. We also have a Patreon, which I'm thinking about expanding some of the rewards on, but go to patreon.com/shelved. We have rewards that allow you to, if you want to have something you want to promote on the show, you can do that. If you want to be on the show, you can do that. Or maybe if you just want to pick one of the scripts that we're going to talk about. There's plenty of reward tiers on there. We offer some bonus episodes that if people donate at that tier, then we're going to record those episodes. Basically more movie commentaries and stuff like that. So be sure to check out our Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/shelved. All right, so let's get into this script. I'm really excited about this one. So as I said, a lot of this script follows the path of Alien Covenant. It's just a little more elaborated upon in some scenes. Some characters are written differently. Some things are just handled better. So I was super excited to read this script. I was a big fan of the original Prometheus script, which, before I get into it, Prometheus is one of my favorite sci-fi films in the last 10 years. I really love that movie, and I loved how little it had to do with Alien. And one of my biggest problems with Alien Covenant is how that stuff was kind of forced in there. I do think there are great moments in Alien Covenant, and I do like that movie. It's just there are multiple parts that kind of bring it down, and it felt like a half sequel to Prometheus. And I will say this original script isn't like the full-on sequel to Prometheus that I wanted, but it's still a much better version of the movie, in my opinion. So one of the big differences is right away the opening of the movie opens with like a star forming, like an explosion. And if you recall in the beginning of Alien Covenant, Walter is on the ship talking to Mother, who is the computer that controls the ship, and they get hit with a neutrino blast, which is from the star. In this, you actually see the star blow up, and the other one is just kind of a random event. So that's a big difference already. And also, Mother has more of a conversational demeanor. So like she actually talks to Walter a little more. So that's kind of a big difference between the version of Mother in the movie, who's just kind of like Siri, just here's the things I have to say, I'm saying them, versus reactionary. And even I think there's even a couple quips from Mother in there. So it's already kind of written a little different. So the ship gets hit with the nebula blast that damages the recharging solar flaps. If you remember the movie, it had the big gold flaps that came out. I will say, getting into it already, if you haven't seen Alien Covenant, you should watch it before listening to this episode, just because it does follow that movie and it does do things a little differently. So it's worth watching the movie just to see the differences. You're going to get more out of it. Okay, so right away. So we get the neutrino blast damages the ship. It actually causes a lot more damage to the ship in the script than it seems to in the movie. So we get our crew waking up, and these are our main characters. It's the emergency crew that wakes up. Just like in the movie, the captain, who in the movie played by James Franco, who I think has one little speaking line in the movie, which is just on like a video. He gets roasted alive in his sleep pod. A big difference here is they spend a little more time kind of mourning the captain. And the main character in the movie was Daniels. In the script is Griffin, who's kind of our Ripley stand-in, because every Alien movie needs their Ripley. There's a lot more scenes of her kind of mourning the captain. Another thing to point out with the crew is that there is a gay couple, which actually I'm glad they changed, in the sense that I don't think it would really make sense if the whole point of this expedition, I guess, or mission, is it's a colonization mission. So the whole point is to go to a new planet and repopulate a planet, set up a new colony. If you're going to do that, you would think you would want to send straight couples who could reproduce. So I understand the idea of like, we include a gay couple in the script, but it to me makes more sense scientifically with like a straight couple, just because that would be the idea is, hey, we're gonna go have this colony. But I don't know, it wouldn't have been a big deal either way. But that was just something I noticed. So yeah, there's more mourning for the loss of her husband. She hangs out with Walter, Daniels, Griffin. So if I say Daniels, just know I mean Griffin. I'm gonna try to stick to the name in the script. But Griffin, she spends a lot of time with Walter. So he's the robot that Michael Fassbender plays. In both movies, he's David and Walter. But she spends time with him a lot because she thinks that he would know what it's like to be alone. Because the whole point of this, colony, as I said, so it's all couples. So, now that her husband is dead, she is now alone. So she kind of spends a lot of time with Walter, and they form a little bit of a bond, which is something that'll be addressed later in the movie. So the repair scenes do take a little longer throughout the script, because in the movie, it's just you get the scene where they decide that they have to repair the ship. And one thing that is cut out of the script that I actually rewatched the movie right before this, that I like in the movie, is Orem, the character who becomes the new captain now that the captain is dead. There's a big angle in the movie of him being a religious man and, believing in faith. And that's something that comes up multiple times in the script. And Orem is actually written completely different in the script versus how he is in the movie. In the script, he does make some of the same decisions, but it's a little more... he's a little more grounded, down to earth, I would say. He doesn't make as many stupid decisions in the script as he does in the movie. Like when shit starts to get bad, he is one of those people like, yes, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, so that's a big difference. And there's a lot of dialogue in the movie relating to him and his faith and how a lot of people, he's like, nobody wants to believe me because I'm a man of God. And at this point in the future, it almost seems implied that religion is something that's looked down upon. And that adds an interesting angle to that character in the movie that is actually completely absent from the script. So that I probably would have kept from the movie. But as I said, the repairs go on. If you remember the movie, there's just the scene where Tennessee, played by Danny McBride, is just out fixing the recharging shield, and that's when he gets the transmission, which ends up being the what is it, John Denver song. In this, there's multiple scenes. It goes on. It's them doing this, a couple other characters doing checking out the shielding room or whatever, and then there's Tennessee out on the recharge shield, which he actually goes out multiple times, versus in the movie he just goes out once. And honestly, you really only need it once. I actually like the way it happens in the movie, because rewatching the movie, there's a lot of talk about how this was all just bad luck. Even the fact that they got the transmission was only because Tennessee was out on the rope outside the ship, and his helmet picked up the transmission because he was the one just far enough out to reach it. Which to me it's great. It's all of this horrible shit is going to happen to this crew just because of bad luck. And that's really emphasized in the movie, versus in the ship, it's just, they just pick up on the transmission. So now a big difference between the transmission, between the movie and the script, is in the movie it's the John Denver song. Tennessee recognizes it and he's singing it. In the script, it's actually a transmission message from Elizabeth Shaw, who was the last surviving member in Prometheus, along with David. So it's a little bit of a message where she refers to the planet as paradise, and that it could be heaven or hell, and she can't decide. And I like this a little better. One of my big problems with Alien Covenant is the lack of Shaw in the movie. And it's one thing I would have changed overall in both versions, and something I was hoping to see in the script is I wanted more of Elizabeth Shaw. I wanted to know what happened to her after the Prometheus and after that mission went awry, and where they went and what she got into. In Alien Covenant, it starts and she's already dead. They released a little prologue before the movie, which I guess I should touch on that now. The little prologue just shows how her and David are on the ship, and then it arrives at the planet, and then the prologue scene kind of ends. There actually was a extra prologue, about 13 pages, written for this as well, that was not in the full script, but was actually a separate thing, and I did read that as well. And basically it's an extended version of that video they put out online of David and Shaw, but it's just a little more debate going on. She doesn't want to repair David. She ends up doing it anyway because she starts to get lonely. It shows a lot more of them on the engineer's ship. It shows them kind of building a relationship. And then she never goes to sleep in that version. In the version they put out online, David puts her in the sleep pod, and then they arrive at the planet and drop the canisters. In this, it's different. For one, they never show the flashback scene in the movie. So in the script. In the movie, they have the scene where David, they show him kill all the engineers. In this, they don't show it. But in this extra prologue scene, they did. So it's kind of like a big Frankenstein of how it all fit together in the end. But the big change from the prologue scene that kind of changes the whole thing is they talk about David and Shaw and them growing closer and developing basically a relationship to the point where it almost seems like they're in love. And so they get to the engineer planet and they're holding hands as it's coming in to dock, and it seems like, we made it. We're going to find out our answers. And then David just kills Shaw. And then he hits the button to start dropping the canisters on the engineers, which then kills them all and leaves them in the state they're in the movie. And then this was going to be the original opening of the movie. It was going to be this whole long flashback sequence, and then it was going to cut to the Covenant in space like it does in the movie. I liked the way they had it in the actual movie. I just wish they had the full longer scene, because the way it's written in the script, it actually changes the nature of David's character and his perceived relationship with Shaw quite a bit. But I am glad they didn't include it at the beginning of the movie like it was in the script, the way it was intended. So they decide to go to the planet, as they do in the movie, basically with a little bit of debate. Orem and Griffin, they kind of have less of a debate. So her job is a little different, I believe, in the script, where she's kind of the chief terraforming expert, and they describe their terraforming equipment as missiles, which is something that'll come up later. So she's in the terraforming bay, kind of checking all that stuff out. And Orem is talking to her, and it's a little more of like, in the movie, it's a very hostile, like, I don't think we should do this. I think we should stay on course. But Orem is like, this planet is better than our projections of Origai 6, where we were originally going, and nobody wants to get back in the sleep pods. And in the script, it's a little more like, I don't know if we should do this, but, you're the boss. And I like the version in the movie better. A theme of this is, I do believe there is a Frankenstein version of this script in that movie that could have been a more perfect sequel, in my opinion. I guess I'll kind of run through all that stuff at the end, though. Okay, so we're gonna skip ahead here to the ship arrives on the planet, which a lot of this stuff happens just as it does in the movie. They take the small lander while the Covenant circles the planet in space. And one difference, which a lot of people complained about in the original movie, is they get off the ship, nobody's wearing helmets, nobody puts on a helmet, and everybody complained about it. It wasn't really something that bothered me as much as it bothered everybody else, but I will say, in this version of the script, before anyone gets out of the ship, they send out a couple people, a biology team with helmets, and they're testing the air and everything, and they say it's even better air than what they have on the Covenant. So to me, it makes sense that nobody would want to wear their helmets. They've all been cooped up on this ship. They just came out of cryo sleep. Everybody wants to just like be free, and it will still come back to bite them in the ass like it does in Alien Covenant, but it makes a little more sense. All it takes is like a little line of dialogue, and that's going to be a running message of this script, is a little line of dialogue can change a lot. Okay, so they send out the team, they're tracking the signal. One difference in Alien Covenant, if you remember, there's the line of the planet is completely silent. There's no life, no birds, no animals. That's a big difference here, because the first thing big difference, I should say, because the first thing they encounter is a stream, and it's full of life, bugs and like lizard-like creatures. And I like that. I was at this point, I was like, oh man, this is great. It's going to be so different from Alien Covenant, like already. So Kareen, who I believe is Orem's wife, she's one of their scientists, and she captures one of the lizard creatures, and she wants to stay behind and monitor the stream, which is similar to the scene in the movie where the girl's like, we could start a whole ecological, study right here. And this being the difference being like in here she has life to study versus in that I guess she's just going to look at plant life. But one of the bugs goes into Kareen's nose and pokes her. And this is basically replacing the spore scene from Alien Covenant, where the spores go in the air, go into the guy's ear and stuff like that. So instead, it's bugs that go inside two different people. One goes inside Kareen, and the other goes inside one of the guy who like stays back to guard her. One of the bugs goes into her nose. One of the bugs goes into a guy's nose that's with the other crew who are going to continue on for the signal. And then the guy who stays back to guard her, he gets bit by one of these like slug things. And so, yes, all of this will come back later. And that man is Ledward. Ledward, Ledward. So Ledward gets bit by like a grub. And it's the same, like at one point they're looking at, there's like a body of a squirrel-like creature. So like, oh, well, we know one thing. There's like predators here. And not predators in Alien versus Predator. Predators as in other animals. So they're like, oh, we know there's like animals here. So the crew continues on, and they find the crashed spaceship, just like in the movie. Like I said, a lot of this is going to follow the path of the movie. It's just once they get inside, events are a little different. For example, they go inside the ship, and inside the ship, we already see what are referred to as prototype alien eggs. So eggs from Alien, but they're like smaller. And they're covered in a black mossy fur. And so the crew, they could move deeper into the ship, but one guy, he stays back to take a peek at these eggs. And obviously you're expecting him to get face hugged. It even talks about him getting closer and closer to the egg. But instead, this black moss just whips him across the face, which is kind of weird. But, it's a nice little scene. It's like, oh, you're expecting one thing, another thing happens. So I'm fine with that. It's a little weird. So inside the ship, they find Shaw's necklace, her cross necklace, which was like a big part of her character in the first movie. And again, if that character was Orem, if he was religious like he was in the movie, there could have been more to play off with that, but here it's never brought up. And then they also find her journal, and that's where they learn her name. So outside the ship, some of the men are searching around, and one of them finds a dead engineer body, like bones and like a part of the armor and stuff, and they actually find it's a big like hill of dead bodies of the engineers. We cut back to the stream, and the guy with Kareen, who was bitten by the slug thing, he starts to convulse. So now it's we got to get this guy back to the ship, leading up to one of my favorite scenes in Alien Covenant and in the script, which mostly when I was watching again, mostly I thought was made very good by the music in that scene, which the music in Alien Covenant I actually really love. And we'll probably use a little bit of that to open up this episode and ensure my YouTube knock for copyright. Okay, so Kareen, she's bringing Ledward back to the ship because he's all freaking out, starting to convulse. At this time, they all come outside the engineer ship, the crash engineer ship, to look at all these engineer bodies. And they talk about bones among shattered jars of the black goo and stuff from Prometheus. And so she's like, Griffin is like, we need to get the fuck out of here. And Orem says, fuck yeah, we do. So they're on their way back. Walter tells Griffin about the Wayland Industries patch and about the Prometheus because they saw her like Shaw's outfit. And they do name drop Wayland Yutani, how, the company is now Wayland Yutani, which is something that has not mentioned in Alien Covenant. They mentioned the Wayland company. They never mention Yutani ever. So we cut to Kareen and Ledward. They make it to the ship first. Again, this whole chunk of the script is exactly as it is in the movie with a little bit of a minor difference. So they get to the ship. He's freaking out. They put him in the med bay. Tennessee's wife is also at the ship, so they see. Okay, I took a screenshot of this scene because I need to be able to perfectly describe what gross fucking scene happens here. So in the movie, it's the spores that cause them to get infected with the neomorphs that come popping out of them. I'm trying to find. I screenshotted this line or this moment. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to read this little section just so I can describe, because instead of just like convulsing and bleeding, he has, because of the bite on his neck and stuff, he's kind of changed a little bit. Okay, so it says they heave Ledward onto a table. Kareen already scrambling through med cabinets, spilling supplies. Ferris, who's Tennessee's wife, sees on Ledward's neck up to his cheek, his skin is pocked with regularly spaced, fresh, weltering holes. Suddenly, the skin on his neck parts, revealing a wet crochet of living matter, like albino worms knitting together. Ferris recoils, horrified. Ledward stares at her with vacant, dead-eye shock. So basically, where he got bit, it's like starts like eating away at his skin and like separates into this white mess. And it's a little confusing the way it's described. Like, I like the idea of like, oh, he just like has a thing burst out of him, because that's still what ends up happening. Is even though Ferris notices that Kareen has the same holes on her arm, because remember she got infected by one of the bugs flying in her nose. And again, that's something that doesn't make sense, because The grub is what put the alien inside. Okay, actually, I guess it does make sense because the grub. Okay, no, it doesn't make sense because the grub put the alien inside Ledward. Kareen got the bug in her nose, and then one of the other guys on the other mission got a bug in his ear, just like in the movie. And he has an alien pop out of him the same way Ledward has a neomorph pop out of him inside the ship. And it happens just like in the movie. Like, the other crew is on their way back to the ship when all of a sudden their guy starts convulsing and freaking out. And, you know, in the ship, the alien pops out of Ledward. It kills Kareen, just like in the movie. While Ferris runs out and she gets a gun and she tries shooting this neomorph. She blows up the lander, and as that's happening, the alien busts out of the guy outside. And then they're dealing with these two neomorphs that are attacking them until David comes in and saves them. So all that kind of plays out pretty much the same as in the movie, which is my favorite scene in the movie. And everything, like all the stuff with David is a little different. So while this is going on in space, Rix, who's one of the people left up there with Tennessee, he wants to manually pull out one of the sails to recharge the ship. Because as like the lander scene is happening, they lose contact with the lander because they get too close to the planet to try to boost their transmission. But it turns out the electrical storm that surrounds the planet is there for a reason, which is something we're going to find out later. Because the people in space, they're actually given more to do in the actual movie. So David, he starts leading them back to, you know, his little place. There's a lot of conversation with David on the way versus in the movie you don't really get. He just like, you know, follow me. He explains that Shaw died in the crash and that the planet is poison, full of creatures, and that their ship that the lander would have crashed if they tried to leave. Like, he's the one that tells him there's electrical interference around the planet. It's in the movie too. But in the script, it's implied that it's there on purpose, that it was a defense mechanism by the engineers. Like, once the black goo got out, they put up this electrical field to prevent anything from leaving the planet. Basically, any ship would just, like, malfunction. And that's why the Covenant is malfunctioned right now. So, yeah, they arrive in the city, just as they do in the movie, and all the dead engineers are kind of sprawled all out. He says their ship killed them. It's implied that the electrical... Oh, no, never mind. So we actually see more of the city in the movie. Like, if you watch the movie, you see them kind of enter the engineer city, but you don't see a lot of it. In this, they're walking through streets and looking up at architecture, which I kind of wish they did. Like, a big problem with the movie is we don't get enough of the engineers. I would have liked to have seen more of that. So Orem is more proactive here. Like, he doesn't trust David, and neither does Griffin, which is in the movie. It's David, or Orem is kind of just, he seems like in way over his head in the movie, versus in this script, he is definitely very shaky with David and everything that's going on. So yeah, David brings him to his kind of abode, and they see that he has all these drawings and everything, and a lot of references that David can draw and create and that Walter can't. Also, to point out, in this skirmish with the Neomorphs, Walter lost his arm saving Griffin, or he lost his hand, rather, not his whole arm, where an alien was going for Griffin, and he like punched it in the mouth, and then the alien bit off his hand, which is something that'll come up later, just as it does in the movie. So up in space, they end up getting the sails out so they can recharge. You know, they get the sun hitting their sails and get the ship's power back online, because the ship lost power, and they actually lost their gravity too, so that was a big problem. And they're like, oh, all these colonists are going to die in the storage if we don't get this thing back up and running. So David explains about the planetary shield, basically, that there are these two satellites, and they create the shield, and they're going to have to destroy one to escape. A little moment here is Griffin and Cole, one of the other men on their team. They kind of have a short conversation. I don't know why I said convo. They had a short conversation about his wife, that she's in a pod and they have an embryo, just kind of giving a little more character to all these, like, all these colonists they have up on the ship that no one really cares about. But this script kind of makes a point to have this little moment where they just kind of talk about it. There's a lot of talk as if David perceives himself as human. Walter can taste and David can't. And it's just like those things. There are bits where they talk about how Walter was, they were able to, they upgraded his version compared to David. David was the first, so obviously Walter is going to be a little more advanced. David can create; he's not bound by anything, but Walter can't. And David tells him it's a tease that he's given the ability to be able to taste things, but he's not able to like create food. Like he couldn't cook a meal, but he can taste a meal. And yeah, I really like the way... I mean, the David and Walter scenes were some of the best in Alien Covenant anyway, because Michael Fassbender is a goddamn national treasure. But in the script, it's even better, just because there is a clear difference between the philosophies of these two robots, and Walter is perfectly fine just blindly taking orders, and David is not. And as I said, there are multiple times where David sees himself as human and not as a robot. So in their time talking, he shows Walter Shaw's grave. Like there's like a garden area and he's buried her. And he says he loved her the way Walter loves Griffin. And Walter's like, I don't love, I can't love, we're not able to love because we're robots. And David says that they're human. It's just that the crew doesn't know it yet. Which, as I said, David perceives them as being human. So the Covenant, they end up getting their power back on, and the ground crew, they're able to communicate with them, and Griffin ends up talking Tennessee through using one of the terraformers to destroy the lodestone, which is what they call the satellite stone that's keeping the electrical interference around the planet. This is where I talked about how the terraforming equipment was kind of like missiles, which they never say how it works, but basically they launch one of those into one of the satellites and blow it up. So now the Covenant just has to recharge a lander and send it down, and it's going to take like 12 hours or something like that. So now everybody just has to wait. It's during this time that Orem reveals to Tennessee that his wife died, which in the movie is like a scene between Tennessee and Daniels and / Griffin. And there, even in the script, it's implied that Griffin and Tennessee are friends, but we don't even see the mourning moment of Tennessee with his wife, which I like. Danny McBride in Alien Covenant, and he's given a pretty good character to play. And it's that part is missing from the script. I would have kept that from the movie. So now they're waiting 9 hours. David starts showing Orem around, and he shows him his laboratory. And this leads to the infamous scene where he shows him the alien eggs, and then Orem gets a facehugger on him. Now I have to say, this was a big controversy in Alien Covenant. Everybody was talking about how stupid the crew was and blah, blah, blah. How would you let this guy do that? Blah, blah, blah. In this script, it is way more believable the way it's written, mostly because we're missing the scene where one of the neomorphs shows up and kills one of the crew, and David sees the neomorph and he's like in love with it, and Orem shoots at it and David's like, no, like that scene is gone. So David doesn't seem like a crazy, creepy robot that we need to keep our eyes on and probably shouldn't listen to. In the script, David is nothing but sweet and kind to them. And I think that's a big improvement, because when the scene comes where he shows him the eggs, and as a viewer, you know what's going on. Like, oh, those are alien eggs, blah, blah, blah. But in this, he's like, yeah, go ahead, check them out. He does say that, he's been become kind of a zoologist and trying to document life and create the life that he can. So it is implied that in his 10 years of time he's kind of done these experiments. But as I said, he's coming off completely normal, completely polite to them, that when the facehugger scene happens, you're like, okay, I can see why this guy, like, I know because I've seen an Alien movie, but I can understand why this guy would be willing to trust David. So Walter and David, they have another little conversation, or they were having a conversation earlier, and Walter notes that David misquoted Ozymandias, which is something he says multiple times throughout the movie and in the script about it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, or rule in heaven than to serve in hell, or something like that. And he quotes it to the wrong writer. And Walter noticed that. And it's a scene that shows that there is something wrong with David. Like, Walter assumes that, like, he's a robot. He shouldn't have misquoted that. He should know. And in the script, it's implying that you see that David becomes a bad guy because he is maybe malfunctioning, that something is wrong. Like, David sees himself as this all-knowing, all-understanding person when really it's not like that. And also another big problem that people complain about with the Alien Covenant is the incubation time with the aliens. It seems to go pretty quickly in the movie. It's like, he gets the facehugger, cut away to a scene, cut back, the facehugger's already off him, and then the alien pops out of it. Like, it all happens very quickly. The good thing about the script is, like, there's some time jumps. Like, when the alien gets latched onto his face, it's hours later, like, I think even the next morning, that the alien bursts out of him. Like, he wakes up and David is just sitting there staring at him. And he's like, David's, kind of researching him. He's like, oh, what was the last thing you remember? And Orem, he's like, I don't know, I was having this nightmare. And he's just like, why are you staring at me? And David answers just with anticipation. And then the chest burster happens, and David is so happy about it. And then there's some more time passing. So I guess it is, in my notes here, I said it is the next morning when everyone is waking up. So it is hours later when the alien pops out of Orem, and then it is the next morning before we ever see a full-grown alien, versus like 10 minutes that's in the movie. This goes a long way to improving those scenes of the movie. Like, we're not fucking with the alien life cycle too much here. They're given plenty of time for it to be believable. So the next morning, the crew's waking up, getting ready for the ship. They can't find Orem. Walter, in his time alone, thinking, he has pieced it together that David killed the engineers, and he created the life on the planet, and he called the ship there so he could get off. So he says that he's not made to serve, but Walter says that they are, because, Walter's just a robot through and through. So David plans to create these creatures. He's created the alien, which, again, something that never bothered me in the movie that bothered other people. I'm like, fine, whatever. I understand nobody wants to know the answers of where the alien came from, but if this is going to be the answer, I guess I'm fine with that. I would have preferred if it was just how it was in the original Prometheus script, that the engineers were the ones who created them, and they were going to send them the Earth instead of the black goo. But I also like the idea of the black goo. If you haven't read the Prometheus Fire and Stone comic books, that whole series, I highly recommend checking it out. It's actually a really solid sequel to Prometheus, and some weird shit happens. So yeah, now a good chunk of this kind of takes place the way it does in the movie. David and Walter, they have a little scuffle. David shoves Walter off a cliff, but Walter grabs onto a vine. David thinks he's dead. Lope and Cole, who are two of the crew, they're attacked by a facehugger. Lope he's holding off a facehugger. It gets its little tongue thing into his mouth as he's holding it off, and does lay some sort of egg inside of him. As he is holding that off and Cole is trying to help him, the alien appears behind Cole and attacks him, the one that busted out of Orem. While this is all going on, Griffin is attacked by a facehugger, but she's holding it off until David shows up and he actually kills it, and kind of like, playing the hero. Like, he picks it up and smacks it against a wall and then smashes it under a rock. But he broke its leg while he was pulling it off her, and her cheek got burned with some acid. But we find out quickly that he's just using her because he needs her to get on the ship. But Walter ends up showing up and saving Griffin. So Walter takes away David's confidence. They're going to fight while I think it's Lope. Is that the surviving guy? Yeah, Lope and Griffin are running to meet Tennessee at the ship, the drop point, which is going to be at an arena that the engineers had. Walter stays back to fight David, and he actually takes away some of David's confidence by showing him that he quoted Ozymandias wrong, which I like. You know, he asks him, like, who wrote Ozymandias? And David says one name, and Walter says the correct name, and it talks about David suddenly gets a look of shock across his face. Like, he's somebody who has never thought he's ever been wrong, and suddenly he's been proven that he was. Like, they even show that he was kind of calculate, like, it looked like he was, researching his databanks in his head to get the right answer. And I like that. I like the idea that there's something wrong with David, and he didn't just turn bad because he could. The movie doesn't really give you a lot of answers in that, and the script does a better job. So as they're running to the landing zone, they're being pursued by the alien, and then all of a sudden they see there's the two neomorphs from earlier in the movie. They show up, and so they're kind of like surrounded, but what ends up happening is the xenomorph proper, the proper alien, the main alien that we know, starts attacking the neomorphs. Like, these are two different species, and so they're going to fight. And the alien is going to naturally go towards the creature that it sees as being a bigger threat, which I like. It's something from the alien mythology, and it fits with the way that creature would act. So they continue running to the Coliseum. They call it arena, but basically, I guess, picture like a giant Coliseum with a bunch of the dead engineer husks inside, the way they are in the movie. So they get inside, and all of a sudden the alien shows up. Like, the alien and one of the neomorphs show up as the ship is coming in for a landing. So they are fighting with these things. Lope ends up getting attacked and drastically hurt. One of the neomorphs the one remaining neomorph, it's implied that the alien must have killed the other one, gets killed. Walter ends up showing up just in time and says David is on his way, and he helps Lope onto the ship as Griffin makes it onto the ship, and they take off. Now, a big difference here is the alien gets on the ship as it does in the movie, but she doesn't go out on the deck and like hook up a rope and swing around as she's fighting the alien, which is a scene I actually really like. And this is just the alien is running around on the ship until it gets close to the engines, and then they like thrust the engines on, and then the alien falls off the ship down to the planet, presumably to smack on the ground and die. So they get back up to the Covenant. Everybody's getting repaired. They put Lope inside the med bay. Griffin's getting some new skin on her cheek for the acid burns, and Walter gets a new right hand installed, which if you pay attention in the script, and if you've seen the movie, you already know the twist. Walter lost his left hand, and in the script, it's all in caps letters. Walter gets a new right hand. So obviously, Walter is David. That switch gets revealed a little later. So they're on the ship. There's kind of like, some nice time. Tennessee's making breakfast, and all of a sudden, Griffin remembers that Lope said that the facehugger put something in his mouth. And so they run to the med bay, and they find him all split open, which I like the way it happens in the movie a little better, where all of a sudden the mother computer just detects a life form on board and alerts the ship, versus in this they run there, they find them split open, and then they ask Mother, scan the ship for any life forms, and they're like, oh yep, there's you guys, there's these guys, and then there's some other fucking thing over here, I have no idea. So I like it better in the movie. Of you would think that the computer would be scanning at all times and would just notice that right away. So the end of the movie pretty much plays out the exact same way as it does in the script, just with a little more gunfire. So they lure the alien into the terraform bay after it kills the two people in the shower. Basically, it's they make the terraform bay very cold, and they're wearing like spacesuits. so they can see the breath of the alien is kind of the big difference. And there's a lot of them taking shots at the alien, except they're not hitting it. So they end up blowing it out the airlock just as they do in the movie, except with they don't use the big truck that they do, like the big, like, I guess, terraforming or earth moving truck that they launch out the bay. In this, they use the other terraforming missile thing. And, you know, hopefully they have more of those because they still have to terraform the planet they're heading to. But yeah, they end up, you know, launching the alien out with that. And so that's it. It's all wrapped up. Everybody's getting put back into cryosleep. Walter is going to, you know, he's going to... And if you recall in the movie, there's the scene where they talk about Griffin / Daniels and her husband / James Franco building a cabin on Orgai 6 when they get there. Instead, in this movie, or this version in the script, when the husband dies, Walter spends a lot of time with her alone. They actually dump his body alone versus it's like a full funeral in the movie. And in this, it's her hanging out alone listening to his records. Like, he has a record player. And there's actually a cool scene I like where they actually show the ship jumping into like hyperdrive mode, basically, and she's listening to a record and the ship is about to jump, so she picks up the needle because when the ship jumps into hyperspace the whole thing shakes real quick, and then she puts the needle back down as not to disturb the record. Like, I like stuff like that. And so you know, they were listening to a specific song when they launched out his body. So in the movie, when she, you know, Walter's putting her into cryosleep, she asks, "Are you going to help me build my cabin?" In this, she asks, "If anything happens to me, can you play the song that we played for my husband?" And both times, you know, they get the same reaction. You know, David or Walter doesn't know what she's talking about, and then he's clearly just like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, totally." And she realizes that it's not Walter, it's David. And then he puts them into cryosleep. And bum, bum, bum. Big twist. Walter is David. Like, we didn't know that was coming. So, yeah. The end, also slightly different. So, Walter, he has Mother, you know, play some music. I believe it's the same song, which they actually reference. One thing that's missing from this version is the original opening to Alien Covenant, which is a scene I like a lot. Which is the scene with what's his name, Guy Pearce and David, like after he first makes him, and they have the little bit in the beginning. That is completely absent from the script. I really like that in the movie. I wish it was here. And the song he asks him to play is kind of the wraparound at the end of the movie, which that song is also, you know, the same song they use here, but there is no beginning scene to make it kind of mean something. So then what does David do? In the movie, he goes into the embryo room and he coughs up 2 facehugger embryos. So he's taking them with. He's gonna have his little facehugger babies, and he's gonna start his army. And that's something about the script, is they actually give David a plan. Is he wants to create this alien army and then take them to Earth because he despises humans. He sees himself as superior and things like that. That's a lot of stuff you have to just kind of assume in the movie that is just laid out for you in the script, and I think is handled a lot better. In this, it's a little different. On the ship, the Covenant, they mention they have like a little section, which if you've seen the Lost in Space movie, you might recognize this. There's a little section of the ship where it's kind of like a little forest here, like a garden. And instead of coughing up the embryos, in the script, he just has 3 little baby alien eggs, just like they saw in the crashed engineer ship, and he's taking care of the eggs. So it's the same implications in the ending, it's just handled a little differently. And as I said, that is a running theme of this script, is everything that happens in the movie happens in the script, it just happens a little differently. And I think the script handles it a lot better, particularly with David. David is not presented as a clearly evil character that the main characters are just not picking up on. He's presented as this like awesome, great guy who's helping them, and he's been here for 10 years and he has his story and he wants to help them get out so he can get out. It's done so much better in the script. As I said, I do think there are things you could Frankenstein from both versions into a third version that has everything you would need. I like the religious aspect of the character Orem. I like it's just a couple of the moments the way they are in the movie, but I like the explanation for things, and I like the handling of the characters more in the script. They don't seem as stupid. The crew comes off just like a little bit smarter. I like it. I like it a lot. This is one of my favorite scripts I've read for the show, and honestly, if the movie was made exactly as it is in this script, it would have been better. I do like Alien Covenant, but it's like a 3 out of 5. This script could have been a 4 out of 5 easily for me, a 4, maybe even a 5 if it was made well enough, which Ridley Scott makes pretty good fucking movies. The scenes I like are still there, but a little bit different. I do like the lander scene with the aliens bursting out better in the movie. But again, a lot of that has to do with the music. But I do think like the way it's described of like, oh, the holes in the skin and shit like that, I think it's better in the movie. So that's all I have for Paradise Lost, aka Alien Covenant. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I highly recommend reading the script. You can actually find it if you go to avpgalaxy.net, which is a website I used to frequent when I was obsessed with reading about Alien and Predator stuff that was coming out. I used to be pretty active on that site, and you know, there's not a lot of news that's going to be popping up on there after this Predator movie comes out, because they're a fan site dedicated to Alien and everything Alien and Predator. But they have a download section that has a lot of the scripts. You can actually find this script, and you can find an earlier Alien Covenant script that has some of the stuff. Like, it's kind of the version in between this version and the movie, where some of the stuff from this version is still there, some of the stuff in the movie is there, but it's not quite what the movie turned out to be. But yeah, I really enjoyed this script. I hope you guys check it out. I highly recommend, if you're a fan of Alien, if you were kind of indifferent about Alien Covenant, even if you hated it, I highly recommend reading the script, because I do think the script is better and opens up some things and just overall makes it a better experience. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure to check out all those social media links. Make sure to check out the Patreon again, www.patreon.com/shelved. I do have a little bit of an announcement. This is going to be the first episode where we are no longer going to do mini episodes. I don't really see the point in the mini episode anymore. It just becomes like a little too much work. There will still be mini episodes, just a little more infrequent, and they're not going to be mini episodes. They're just going to be called bonus episodes. So instead of doing a mini episode every Monday, the podcast is now going to come out on Monday instead of Friday. I used to do the mini episode on Monday, the full episode on Friday. It just became too much to do, and there's not enough to talk about in some of the mini episodes. So basically it's going to be, I'm going to read my script throughout the week, record the episode on the weekend, and then post it on Monday. I think this will help give me a regular schedule. The whole idea with the Friday release, and let me know if you still want the Friday release, is I would cover, like, if I had a script for a movie that was coming out or related to the franchise that was coming out. Movies come out on Friday, and that's why I would put them out on Friday. So, for example, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is going to come out on a Friday, and on that week I am going to do the Jurassic Park 4 script, which had a bunch of crazy, weird dinosaur-human hybrid stuff going on. And that would drop on the same day as the movie. Instead, now it's going to drop on the Monday before. So if you'd rather it still come out on the Friday, because just an FYI, if I am covering a movie that is an earlier version of a script to that movie, there could be spoilers. So, which I don't do very often. I don't think I've ever really covered a movie that was the same script related to a movie on the day a movie came out. It's usually an older abandoned script, like Power Rangers, for example, was an older abandoned script. None of that stuff made it into the movie. So I don't know. I think Monday is the better schedule. Now, as I said, there will still be mini episodes. They will just be called bonus episodes. And these episodes will kind of cover huge movie news that I feel like I need to talk about. They will also cover movie reviews for new movies I saw. Like, I actually just saw Annihilation, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. But maybe I'll throw up a bonus episode, a movie review, in the middle of the week, like on a Wednesday or something. So keep your eye out for an Annihilation review. But yeah, so that's gonna kind of be the new way of things. Is no more mini episodes. I will cover that stuff on a bonus episode. They will be infrequent. Just when I feel like there is something to talk about, I will talk about it. If there's a movie I just saw, I will review it, and that'll just be released as a bonus episode whenever that happens. But yeah, new release schedule, I guess, is just going to be on Mondays. That should give me plenty of time to record my episodes and get them out for you guys. So I hope you listen to this. You didn't duck out after the script. I will also put it in the show notes probably, just to let people know that there is this message at the end of the script. But that's going to be it for today. Go watch Alien Covenant. Read this script, Paradise Lost. I highly recommend it. Thanks, and I'll see you again on next Monday's episode.